It's very easy in church to just see your congregation as your congregation. They come in on a Sunday and they go out. But actually sitting in the pews will be a number of people who are unemployed. And I often feel that the church, and I do feel the church this very strongly, that actually we think our congregation leave their brains on the doorstep and their lives on the doorstep and come into a holy huddle. But really, there are real needs that come into the church. And I think, in a sense, what a church, along with other churches, could get together, especially one that has a room, and canvass your own congregation. See how many in your own congregation are unemployed. Or if there's a group of churches, how many in that group are unemployed. And then you can set aside, let's say you've got a gap in your church, in your room's calendar, and say, right, let's set up a club. I mean, it doesn't have to be lunchtime, it can be any time, but just set up a space where people can come and share their experience. Because what's happening is, particularly in the church, and if your church is successful, I think it's even worse than perhaps even a working class church. What happens is people are pretending they're not unemployed because they fear that if they say they're unemployed, they'll be a second-class citizen. But with recession, and the recession as it is now, that's not the case. It can hit anybody. It can hit them, the bank manager to the cleaner. But those two people still have this great need, and the need is not to feel isolated, not to feel as though you have done something wrong in your life. A little example, I spoke on the radio and I was talking about how people sit alone and they feel second-class citizen, they feel isolated, they feel they're failed. And I said, you haven't failed. No one has failed. This is what's happening. And a year later, somebody came up to me and said, I heard you on the radio, and that day I was particularly low. I felt the world was against me and I felt like giving up. And your voice came over the radio and said, you are not a failure. God loves you. You're unique. You're a special person. And it's not your fault you're unemployed. And he said it gave him such courage. And it really did hit the mark. And I think as people of faith, that's what we ought to be saying. We ought to be reminding people that their lives are above, their lives are deeper than just having a job. Their lives are rich and fruitful and they have tons to give to people. And they are unique. They're sons and daughters of the living God. And that's really important. And I think as ministers of faith, we ought to be saying yes, and really tell our congregations that they are loved, and particularly those who are unemployed, that God does love them. And no, God will not just suddenly wipe away and find a job in the middle, but he doesn't. But you don't have to travel alone either. That you do have people who love you and support you, and that you are a God-given child of God, and I think that's really important. church warden here at St Augustine's was actually unemployed and had been a long time unemployed. And he had already trained as a chaplain for the retail sector. But being unemployed, it didn't really work well in the sense that he was talking to people who were having a job and they were moaning, and he would have loved a job. And I think in one way it started that relationship between us so I got to know him. And then he said, I'm thinking of starting a group for the unemployed, but really I can't do it on my own. I need somebody who has perhaps the ear of the church, but more, who has the contacts. So together what we decided was that we'd set up this group here, this group, which is a self-help group for those that are unemployed. And we set it up, and we invited people to come along and put out adverts on one thing or another. And it was very slow at first. We barely really got very much response at all. And then he got a job, and I tried to struggle with it on my own a little bit, and it was failed almost. But then what happened was he lost his job again, which was quite awful. But in one sense, we said, right, let's do it properly this time. And we had a proper launch date, and we sent out adverts, and we invited lots of people to come. And we had a big launch date. And I said I would do food on the launch date. And we had quite a few people come then. And really, that was it. From then, it has been much more successful. And we run every week between 12 and 2. And although the food was only meant to be the first time, I felt that the food was important, not because we're a soup kitchen, because we're not a soup kitchen. And the unemployed don't line up and like a canteen. We all sit round the table together and eat. And it's really about hospitality, and it's really about building up people's confidence, and in a sense making them know that they're worth something. Because a lot of people who are unemployed, if they're long-term unemployed, they're starting to feel less human, less worth it. Because although when you get made redundant, and the people that come here on the whole have been made redundant, people say to them, oh, it's not you, don't take it personally, it's not you who's been made redundant, it's the job, or it's this, or it's that. Well, when you're being made redundant, it don't feel like that at the time. It feels like you're very much made redundant. The other thing that on the launch date, which was quite successful, because I have links with the BBC, and so I was able to phone up local radio and talk on local radio and tell them about the job club. So we got that really going. And then we had another stroke. It got very good, you know. It is very good. I went to the local SCP conference, Swindon Strategic Partnership Conference. And I hate those things. They're the same things every time. And I'm thinking, why am I here, you know? Anyway, I happened to sit next to this woman, and I expressed that. And she said, why'd you come? I said, well, you have to come, don't you? Otherwise you don't know what's going on and what's happening, you see. And then we introduced ourselves, and she said she was from the Job Centre Plus. She was from the DBT, or whatever it's called, and Job Centre Plus. And I said, "Oh, really?" He said, and I pricked up my ears, and I thought, there was a purpose I came here. And then we got talking, and she said, "I'm trying to find out if there are any work clubs or job clubs to encourage them in Swindon." And I said, immediately, "I run a job club." And so she was, really enthusiastic. And immediately we met the criteria of being a job club. And we was immediately on the books. We were the first job club in Swindon to be classed as bona fide by Job Centre Plus. And actually they recommend people to come along. The other thing one of the things, because most of the people here are made redundant, what we have is a lot of leaflets. And we made leaflets to help people, because when people are made redundant, they're given their redundancy package. Some people have virtually nothing, because you only get a week for 1 year's service. So it's a pittance. The other thing is there's a lot of mixed messages. So, and people don't really know what to expect. So one of the things that, particularly when somebody is new comes to the group, what happens is people talk them through. They have to go for an interview with Job Centre Plus. Now, we have a little card, and it says, "This is what you've got to do. These are the questions you've got to ask," because most people are very mystified. And one interviewer, when you go for your interview, will tell you one thing, and another will tell you something else. So it's very confusing, and you have situations of, where do we go? Because one person, they may say something at Citizens Advice Bureau, and depending on your Citizens Advice Bureau, can you get an interview? To somebody else will go, "So what training is there out there?" Like today, we've had that lady who's come from one of the colleges, just a new college, to say they're setting up a training course. But lots of people don't know this. There are various things that are happening, and it's a whole minefield. It's an absolute minefield. If you're unemployed, if you are self-employed, and you can't get work, and perhaps you've been working for somebody, but you're self-employed and they lay you off, 9 times out of 10 you can't get any benefit at all. Even though you've paid your stamp, you still can't get any benefit. And so there's lots of things that people have to negotiate, and that was one of the things that we set out right at the beginning with this group. We got these leaflets, and we had these leaflets to say what questions you should be asking, where can you go, what can you do, and in a sense try and support this minefield, because emotionally it's very bad. Emotionally it's devastating, but also practically it is, because 9 times out of 10 there are a number of people have never been out of work before, so they don't actually know what to do. And when they sign on, it's also very despondent when you write your CVs. That's the other thing that we do here. Someone comes on a regular basis and helps with CVs, because CVs writing has changed dramatically over the years. So you need people who will be able to come and update CVs. Because if somebody has been in work, let's say 12 years, the same job, and then they present their new CV, they might just add their last job on, but actually the whole thing needs changing. And so that's one of the things that we're able to present. And there's a minefield about CVs. what one person does and what another person does. And so those sorts of things that it's useful having a job club. Actually, you're sitting at home and you're presenting this, and what do we do next? It is an absolute minefield out there when you lose a job. With a job club, you're always trying to find new members, because a successful job club always has a turnover. We actually, at one point, had about a dozen people, and then in a very short time, we went down to 2, because they'd all got jobs. And what happens is, because of the confidence, because they're able to do CVs, because they're able to almost get their chip off their shoulder because they moan, when they go to, and also I bring people in who are employers. Now, they don't give the job, but they do actually do interview practice, so that it gives some people more confidence when they go to their job. We had a lady, and she was a solicitor's clerk. She used to do conveyancing and all sorts of stuff, but she lost her job. And I said, come along to the job club. I think she was a bit iffy, because she thought, oh, what's it going to be like, all working class people and blah, blah, blah. But actually, she loved it. She enjoyed it. And she went to one of the interviews, an interview. When she got there, she found out that there wasn't a job. And she said, and it happened to be a Tuesday. And she said, oh, I'm going to the job club, and then I'm going to tell them how I feel. And she was able to pull that out and yet go to the next interview with more confidence. And she's now working in Cirencester. Another chap had been out of work for 2 years, and he was really despondent. He was felt quite awful. But because he felt that sense of isolation had disappeared, the sense of, I am the only one who is out of work, then when people go to an interview, they can go with much more confidence, because they know, in a sense, the whole of the job club, all their friends here, are supporting them because they're willing them to get a job. We're not here to be a permanent club. If somebody's got work, like we had one chap, and he only came 3 times, and he got another job, and everybody said, great, he's got a job. And so there is that sense of, yes, camaraderie, but not camaraderie to keep them at the job club, but willing people to get jobs. And how can we get jobs? We've also, we started with no money. I mean, people say, oh, we haven't got any money for this. All you need is a hall. I've got occasionally £10 here and £10 there and bits of bits. But then we wanted to get 2, apart from Job Centre Plus, we're also part of the National Job Work Club Network. And so that's something that we are very much linked to. And because of that, and because of contacts, I found out there was a grassroots grant from the Borough Council. Now, the 2 things we want is computers and the internet, because although the libraries have computers, in Swindon Library, they have to queue up, they have to make an appointment. If we have got computers here that are linked to the internet with a printer, that's really useful. So we applied for a job, this grant, and, well, praise the Lord, we got £500 from one grant and £600 from another. Also, somebody has given us some computers. So we will be able to get onto the internet. But what we are doing in a few weeks is having a jobs fair, where I know somebody from McDonald's, and he's going to send one of his top boys to come and do a talk. And then we're going to invite all the people here, like firms throughout Swindon to come and explain, show their wares really, and all the agencies, the firms like Intel and Zurich, and we're going to